Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us for our first AppSheet App Jam, where you'll see step by step how to build an app while learning fundamental AppSheet skills. My name is Lauren, and I'm the content manager for the Google Cloud community. And joining me today are AppSheet experts, Christian and Derek, who will be leading the session and answering your questions live. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to add those into the chat box, and we'll be sure to get to them via the chat or live during the session. So with that, we'll dive right in, and I'll hand it over to you, Christian.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here. The idea for this kind of sprang from our internal training efforts that we've been doing over the last few years in order to get our various customer engineers and stuff up to speed with AppSheet. And so we just had the ideas like, what if we created one of these and start pushing them out to the community? And so if things go well, we'd like to continue in this vein and offer kind of topical sessions where we can go deep. And so to get kind of the overall process started, we figured we'd do like a very basic walkthrough, a fairly complete walkthrough, though, of how to build like a not terribly sophisticated, but at least an application that does touch on a number of different components. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And I will start off with my opening slide here. And as long as everyone can see my slide, feel free to give me a verbal cue, Lauren, but I'm assuming everything's good on your side.
Looks great.
So anyway, so welcome to the presentation. There's not many slides. I'm basically demoing essentially the entire content. But again, this is really a guide for new folks who are getting up to speed on AppSheet and just kind of wanted a good, relatively thorough introduction to AppSheet. And so without further ado, let me just jump right in to essentially what we're going to be covering today. So I'll spend some time initially going through essentially the data features, so how to create tables, how to create slices and such. Then I'll switch over into the user experience or the UX in building UIs. And then just continuing down the list, I'll create behaviors, actions, automations, and finishing up with deployment and sharing as well as security filters. All right, so let me just jump into our actual demonstration application. So this is what I'm starting with. It's a basic Google Sheet. It has a set of requests and users. And the idea is that, typical task or whatever tracking application is going to have, a couple of columns like, what is it that you're requesting access to or need approval for, that kind of use case, I guess. All right. And so in this case, if I want to build an app, there is the traditional way of starting in AppSheet directly, where I would say click make a new app and then start with my own data and then choose like from a data source. But in my case, I'm going to go ahead and kind of speed right through it by using this option here under Google Sheets where it says extensions, and then I can click on AppSheet, create an app. So I'll click on that, and that's actually going to create or generate, I guess, a brand new app for me. So I'll give it a few seconds. So here is the new application. It actually previews the app right here in front of us. I'm just going to close that window, and then just to kind of walk through this environment for those of you who haven't seen it before. Basically, this is the AppSheet environment here. We have all of our different major components of the application, data, UX, behavior, and such. And then over on the right side, we have our preview. And the preview is essentially, modeled after mobile or, tablet and such. And I can also click on that link, and that will open up the app in like more of like a full screen desktop view. All right. So just to get started, what I've done is I've generated a simple application based off of the data that was in the spreadsheet. And you'll also see here that there's even like a chart thrown in for free. So it tries to predict what kinds of functionality you want, and it will go ahead and give you essentially what you need. And so if I wanted to edit any of these, I could go in directly and change anything here. So it's a fully functioning app that I've built without really any effort so far. Now there are some things that I can prove. Like for example, I see this like very long alphanumeric bit of text here, and so I don't really need that. So I'm going to go ahead and update the underlying data object, which is this requests table. And I pop that open, and then you'll see that it's a few things that I want to start changing. First off, let's take a look at the columns. So this is the columns that are represented from that Google Sheet in this request table. So I pop that open there. And then for my first step, I want to unclick the show option there. So just by turning that off, you'll see that I removed this thing here. But I also want to do a few more things. I want to start to set up some initial values, for example. So for example, we have this user column here, and I want to, upon creation of a new record, I want to actually create essentially a user email, like a default user email. And to do that, I just use this expression assistant. I can type it in as well, but I just like to point and click, I guess. So I add that in there, and that will pull up the user of the application's email into that expression. So then that will pop into a new record once it's created, right? And then let's kind of scroll down a few more things here. So here is the status column, and notice it's of type enum. And this was actually given to us for free, mainly because, I'll go back to my sheet again, I actually had built-in data validation for these records. And this allowed AppSheet to take from this hint and say, hey, there are 3 distinct values that this particular column should be. So let's go ahead and set it up with a built-in enum. So I'll just show that here as well. And you can see in the column editor, I have these 3 distinct values that I could do. All right, so pretty straightforward. The other thing I want to step into was the status. I want to go ahead and provide the initial value right here. So I just have to be careful I put it in the correct one. And I want that initial value to be of the type review required. Right, there we go. And I typically give it a second or so, and then the validation comes through and says, yeah, that's a valid expression. So I'll go ahead and close that off. And then finally, I want to update the approver column. So that's this column right here. And I want to set also an initial value. And again, I'll just pick the user email. All right. So there's user email. It's all validated. It's all good to go. All right. So pretty much that's it for now for my updates for the request table. So don't worry about the warning. That's just insignificant. It just says like because I hid the that particular column, it's unsearchable, but that's okay because we need to search for it. Anyway, so moving back over to our tables section here, you can see there's a suggested option to add a table for users. And if you recall in the spreadsheet, we had those 2 tabs. We had a tab for the tables and of course like the users, right? So if I switch back over to AppSheet here, I'll just go ahead and select the add table users. And then here it's going to generate essentially a new table that works with that. Give it a few more seconds. And then also notice here on the requests table, I'm going to pull up essentially the user. And so you notice here that the user is of type email. I actually want that to be of type ref. And by ref, I mean the reference to the actual users table that I've just added. So to do that, I open this up, I select the ref type, and then that pops open the dialog. And then I say, okay, the source table for that reference or for that ref is the actual users table. So now I've effectively linked both my requests and my users tables together. And so if I take a look at the users table, you'll see, oops, I have to do a quick save and you'll see the update. All right, so by saving it, it also created a new column there that is basically the related requests. So that lets us know that we have essentially established a reference or a linkage between these 2 tables. And later on, when I show the UI, you'll see that these are both the requests and the users are linked together, right? All righty. So I've saved everything. I'm going to go ahead and let's see, add a new table, add a request table. And then, yeah, I think we're good. Let's move on to slices. So a slice allows us to essentially issue a query against the data. So I'm going to create a slice really quickly. And this slice will be called related requests or review required. Sorry, my cheat sheet is deceiving me. There we go. There we go. Review required. It's going against the same requests. And then I want to have essentially a row filter condition where the status is review required. Notice how it actually suggested this. And this is actually one of the behaviors of AppSheet in the sense that it will model its suggestions based off of your usage. And so instead of me actually typing in this particular expression, it actually went ahead and did it for me. All right. So I have status equals review required. So we'll go ahead and save that. And that will be a slice that we can use later on, right? So we'll put that away. And so now, once that finishes, we can switch back to our presentation and let's just jump into the UX part. All right, so here we are on the UX part of our demonstration. And so for this one, UX, essentially all of the user experience, all the UIs and such is what we're going to be working with now. All right, so let's go ahead and update the requests view. So here's the one that we have that was built for us automatically. And there's also that statistics one that was given to us for free. I'll just leave that one for, I'm not going to worry about that for now. So we have our request view, and I'll just pull this up over here. And I'm going to make one change. I'm going to change the view type to card. And so that's just a different way to view the data. And this one actually works pretty nicely. You'll see that there's other view types, so I can just page through there and have a good idea for like what to work with. But I'm going to leave that as the card. And then let me go ahead and hit save. And then, as you can probably guess, I'm going to create a new view for users. So let's call this users. And base the data off of users. All right, and I'm just going to leave the default view type as deck. But I will change the display icon. So this display icon down here, I don't want to keep it exactly the same as request. So let's go ahead and change it. So I open up display, and then I type in a real quick search term, and that's the icon that I want. I'll select it, and you'll see that it's been updated right already on the bottom action bar. All right, so I'll click save. Sorry, I had to clear my throat. So anyway, I've added the new users view, as we can see now, and we can toggle between requests and reviews. And incidentally, if I click on one of these users, you'll see that, let's see, I'll go back to the other users here. I think there might be some, there we go. Well, anyway, when I get more data, you can see that there's related data that connects the two, right? So I have my users. I'm going to go ahead and create a new view based off of the slice, all right? So in this case, I just create a new view, and I'll call it required reviews. And for this data, I want it to go against the slice of data there. And then for the position, I'm going to leave it far off to the left. And so that will position it right there. And then I want to change the icon again. So I'll go over here. And for this one, I'm going to search for an alert and select an appropriate icon for that. So there's my required reviews, which is going to use the slice that I created earlier. And then now you can see that it's just 2 records there, and both of these correspond to my account there, right? So you get the idea, pretty straightforward. Now let's move on. Let's do a few more updates to the UI where I'll be changing the look and feel. Now to do that, I click on the brand option at the top. And then here, this is just point and click. I can select any option here. I can change primary color. I can change the app logo, and actually like this particular logo because it looks kind of like a task or whatever. And I'll change a few more options here just to kind of give you an idea of what it looks like. And maybe I'll show the view name in the header, show the logo, and I'll tweak the styling of how it applies the colors. So this all looks pretty good. I'll click save. And maybe take a look at our main page there for requests. So that all looks good. Let's do something else now. Let's go ahead and change the font. So that's under the options tab there at the top, and I can select the fonts right here, and I can just say select the Rubik font, for example. And so it went fairly quickly. I can do it again if you want to see it. But basically, just toggling between the different fonts, it's going to automatically change what it's, what the look and feel is over on the right side. I'll click save. And then let me switch over now to format rules. This is actually something very interesting in the sense that I can set up a formatting rule that will dynamically change the content based off of the actual data itself, right? So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I'm on the request view, and we're going to create a new format rule, and I'm going to call it approved requests. And so for the data, I want to remain on requests, but then I'm going to set this if condition is true expression here, right? So I just have to set it up as if I want the status, and I know the status is my column over here, and I want it to be equal to approved. So I'll let that evaluate, and I'll click save. And so that's the right condition, but I need it to apply it to a different part of the application or a different part of my data. I want it to update the formatting of the status column, right? So I've just selected that. I could actually select multiple columns, but I'll leave it just with status. And I also want it to have a different color, right? So in this case, I'll select green. And so as you can see, it actually changed the approved text to green. I can also even add a icon, right? So here I'm selecting the check icon there, and it just inserted it over here. So now, as you can see, we have other, formatting kicking in, and we can see that as such, right? So rather trivial to do that kind of formatting. So let's switch back to our slides, and let's talk about behaviors, all right? So the next item that I'm going to do is create a simple behavior or action that will allow us to essentially approve a request on the fly. So basically provide like a little button and people can click on it and that will automatically approve that request, right? So to do that, let's create a new action. And I'll name this one approve request. And then all I have to do, so set some of the values of this row is right here. Set the values of some of the columns in this row. That's what I want. I just need to update the column itself, right? So I want to actually update the status. And for here, I just add the text approved, right? So that evaluates and it's good to go. Incidentally, I could update multiple columns, but I'm just going to keep it just to update the particular status, right? And then as far as like the appearance, I can select a, instead of the paper airplane right now, I'm going to change that over to something like a thumbs up. So this is the one that I want right here. So you'll notice that now I have this button over here, and that just means that when I click on that, that will just automatically set that particular column to approve, right? So let's click save. And let's take a look, see if I have any requests here that are not approved. So here's one right here. I'll click on that. I'll click on approve request, and then boom, you'll see that the status has been updated right on the fly. Incidentally, you'll see this little 1 here. That just means that it's synchronizing back to the backend data source. And so now if I looked at that same record over here, new employees onboarding budget, which is this one, you'll see that it's now approved, whereas before it wasn't. Okay, and I could also just change it right here in the spreadsheet and hit the sync button and everything would go back to what it was from the sheet. Okay, so let's go ahead and do the next one. Automations. Or actually, I think I was going to do, yeah, let's do automations now. Oh, there we go. So for automations, that's actually a very powerful feature where it consists of a bot mechanism that has the ability to trigger different processes or tasks. So it's event driven. And so let me just walk through how to do it, and then you'll get a pretty good idea. So I'll reset my app a little bit, and then let's go ahead and create a new bot. And I want essentially a new bot that will trigger when a request record is created, right? And so in this case, I have this suggestion here that says when a request record is created or updated, send a notification. Now, my use case, I want it to be when a request record is created only, and then just send an email. So in that case, let's go ahead and click this option here, and that will set us up already with a pretty good thing here. But I'm going to tweak it slightly. So under here, under the events, I'm going to pop this event open here, and you'll see that it's for ads and updates. I want to just change it slightly to make it so it's just ads only. All right, and then that's pretty much that. Let me go ahead and hit save. And I can walk through the different components of this automation that it has given us, right? So the bot itself gives you kind of like this overall heads down point of view of like the entire flow. So this actually has the old text. I could go in and change it and say is created and just lop off the remaining text there if I wanted to. Likewise, even for this process, I can change it to send an email and such, but you get an idea. So to do it fairly quickly, I can pop into the tasks itself, which is this corresponding part of my overall automation. And notice here that it still says send a notification. I'm going to switch that over to send an email, right? So now it's send an email. And so now it's just a matter of setting up the email, right? And so in this case, it's still going against the request table. I'm going to go ahead and add a to, and I'll say, again, I want to select an expression where I can pull up the user, which is this column, and I'll hit save. And then for the subject, I can do something like this. And maybe I'll say new request. I'll change the actual column value to be description. So as you can see, I'm just using kind of like a templatized text here to pull that data. And this would go into a custom email, right? So click save. And so just a real quick review. Whenever a record is created, I want to send this email notification. I've changed the event type to only trigger off of ads only. So when new records are created, the process is to essentially trigger this notification, which in our case, we actually updated it to send an email right here, right? And I guess I could change that too, just to kind of make it a little bit more consistent. All right, so I'll click save, and the way to test this is I'll just go ahead and create a new record. So I'll click on the plus button in our app preview, and I'll say first test. Leave the status as review required. And here's our signature. I can just scribble a C or something, hit save. That will now save it. So now I just go back over to my, this is my my notification when I created the app, and I should be getting a new notification coming in a few seconds. There we go. Here's our new request. So this got triggered based off of that automation that I just created. And then this is the actual generated text that I had sent. Now this is interesting, but it would be a little bit more interesting if I could actually send parts of the application, like if I could embed parts of my application inside the body of this email. So how you do that? Well, that's actually very easy to do. All I have to do is change the email type to embedded app view. This was also referred to as dynamic email. And I could go through and do more settings where I specify specifically what parts of the app that I want to send over. But for now, I'm just going to keep it as the default, and it will go ahead and actually send this request detail view, which is the detailed view of the form when you actually take a look at the individual record of data, right? So I'll just accept that as the default. I'll click save. And let's go ahead and create a new record. Let's head off again with my scribble. I'll click save, and I'll go over to my inbox here. I can delete that while I'm at it. And in a few seconds, I'll see my new email coming over. There it is. I can pop that open. and it's going to do a fetch, and it pulls over an actual part of the application. In this case, it's the the request detail. And you'll notice that it's actually active here. In this sense, the action is clickable. So I could click on that. So it's now saving it back to the application. And then you notice the status here got changed to approved. So there we go. As you can see, it was rather trivial to create an application where I could essentially trigger an automation that would then send an email and allow the recipient of the email to interact with that application directly. All right. All right. Moving along. Security filters. All right. So what is a security filter? Well, the common use case that you run into is typically when you have like a large amount of data and you want to filter it such that the specific users of, or the specific owners of the whatever records are, only see their records as opposed to everyone else's records. So, so this is rather common use case. And so to do that, let's go ahead and create a new security filter. And so I can do a security filter for users. And I can say security filter where, in this case, I'll go back to my columns. I'll select user. I'll just put in a little equal sign, and I'll type in user email and validate. So there we go. So user, the column user equals to the actual user of the thing, of the application. I'll click save. So once that saves, you'll notice that I have only records that I'm the owner of, right? So it's just a few there. So anyway, you get the idea. So actually I have quite a number of them that belong to me. But anyway, so that's essentially how you would set up a security filter. Let's see, moving on. I can go back into deployment and sharing. So for deployment and sharing, I would click on manage. Incidentally, the intelligence option here has some very cool features where you can create predictive models, which normally it's a fairly sophisticated set of tasks that you would have to do. But in this case, I can do predictive models where I want to model the data or actually use optical character recognition here. There's also even an option where you can set up the smart assistant to where you can actually talk to the application and it will do natural language processing and issue your commands. But that's for another time. I think for now, I think we're ready to go ahead and do a deployment check, and then we'll go ahead and share the application with other users, right? So let's go ahead, and I notice I clicked on deploy, and then I can do a deployment check. And it gives us a report on, is the app ready to be deployed? And it has a few warnings, but they're all pretty trivial, like description, launch icon, and such. So I'll go ahead and click on the button to move the app to deployed state. All right, so as you can see, the app is now deployed, but I want to actually bring in other users to the application, either to help me edit the application or to actually become users themselves. So to do that, I just click on this familiar share icon, and that brings up this dialog. And for this one, I'm just going to add another developer in my domain here. So that validates just by tabbing through it, and I can specify whether I want to have them use it or edit the actual application. I can pop open this a little bit more options here. So I selected edit definition. I can have them as an admin or specific user, and I can even go into specific versions of the application. So I'll leave that as the default, and then I'm going to go ahead and notify the user here. In this case, this particular account will get a notification via email. All right. So that's going to fire off an email. All right, so now we have this list of users that are ready to, work with the application itself. And then if I go over to this other inbox, which happens to be this particular account, Joe Developer, I will see a incoming invite. So I'll give that one a few seconds here. And there we go. So we have an email that got sent to this particular account, Joe Developer, and then this person can now edit the application using their own credentials or even install an application directly as is. So that's basically it. Just wanted to give you a general kind of walkthrough of how to build a relatively moderate application, which does exercise a number of like the core features of AppSheet. So we can switch over to the Q&A portion of our presentation and see if there's any questions. And I'll also pull up the next slide just so you can see it as well. So how are we doing on time? Any questions queued up?
Well, yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, Christian. That was a great walkthrough and demonstration. And we do have a couple of questions on the queue, and we were able to answer some over the chat. So we'll get to those. But just a quick rundown here is that if you haven't yet, please, we'd love to join and hear from you in the community. So that's that top link there. And that's also where we'll be sharing this recording and a recap post, including step-by-step instructions so you can go through this again at your own pace and ask any follow-up questions that you may have. And then we'd love to hear your feedback too. So there's that third link there where you can share your feedback and ask for future topics and different sessions that we can focus on for you. And then lastly, we have our office hours coming up on August 4th. So we'll be focusing on app lifecycle management. So if you're able to join us for that, we'd love to see you there. And that information to join is also in the community in the events section. So with that, I think we'll hop into the Q&A. All right, so our first question that we have here is, I am facing weird issues for my app sheet on how to get assistance.
So the default answer, or if you want to take that one, Lauren.
Yeah, so definitely would say please go to the community to get information and search first to see if your answer is already there. And then also you can add it to the Q&A forum to get support on your specific question. And then also the help documentation for the AppSheet Help Center has amazing resources and documentation based on different categories like those that we've covered today. So I would start there.
I would say when you say weird issues, definitely you want to provide as much detail as possible. So it's like weird issues with your data modeling, with your UI building, all that kind of stuff is always super helpful.
For sure. Okay. Can you please go over the white label option and how it differs from deployment?
So that's obviously a more extended process, much more than what we're planning to show today. But typically, it's like when you want to have an application ready to be installed locally, like in the marketplace for mobile users. I haven't actually gone through that full step personally myself, but I don't know if Derek, if you have any experience on how to actually go through the full process of white labeling applications.
I haven't, excuse me, I haven't executed the process myself.
Yeah.
I'm getting better from a little COVID over the weekend, but sorry for that.
No worries.
I haven't gone through the process myself. I do know that it's the same process as you would go through for any other application. AppSheet does offer some docs, and I'll post a link here in the comments. What you end up with is a package that you can deploy on the iOS or Android store. And then you're able to remove much of the branding. So you can white label it, which means you can apply your own company's branding if you like. And then you can post it onto either of those stores. You can also charge for those apps. When a user downloads the app, though, they'll be counted as an active user under your account. And so I'll post a link for additional details.
Yep. Cool. Thanks, Derek.
Great. It looks like another question around deployment. Helen, if you have more specific questions that you're looking for, you can add those into the chat. But Christian, Derek, do you have any general information on deployment options that you can share?
Yeah, I'll actually post also a good AppSheet help article into the chat if that's helpful as well. Let's see.
It looks like a follow-up question as well is when you share the app to other people, do you have to deploy it first?
So typically I always deploy first, but Yeah, I guess you're right. I mean, I think you can share it without deploying it to have a collaborator with you working on building the application. I forget if we actually hold you to that, though. Do you recall that, Derek? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, I was reading one of the other questions there about support. What was your question?
Oh, it has to do with deployment. Like, can you add collaborators before you actually deploy? And I've typically deployed first.
Sure.
But yeah, it's typically like we just want a co-editor. So yeah.
Yeah. So apps can be in prototype status or deployed status. When an app is in prototype mode, the actions from automation, so like sending emails, for example, won't actually execute, so you don't spam people by accident. And then once you deploy the app, then all of those work as you would expect. You can add collaborators in either prototype mode or in deployed mode. And if you're using a free account on AppSheet, then you'll be actually restricted to only using that prototype mode. And if you're ready to deploy, then you would be prompted to purchase a paid subscription.
Got it. Awesome. I think a follow-up question is, what is the difference between deployed and not deployed?
Yeah, so that I'll keep going on that one. I kind of touched on it there. There are a couple differences there. So the one that I just mentioned, where if you have email notifications, they'll be sent to the app owner until the app is deployed. So that's probably the thing that you'll notice most. The other difference is largely when customers have governance enabled. So sometimes the administrator for account wants to have oversight when an app is getting more users and when an app is changing from prototype to deployed state. So we offer that distinction, and we allow controls to be placed based on the status of the app. So what do we mean by that? A prototype, for example, could be restricted to only have 5 or fewer users, or 10 or fewer users. The admin can specify that threshold. They could allow anybody to have prototype apps, and then you could have a governance policy that allows only people on a specific list to deploy those apps or get more than that specified threshold of users. And that way you can control shadow IT. So the goal of AppSheet is to give more visibility and more control to the IT department, and not just create the Wild West. And so that prototype setting is one piece of being able to execute those governance policies.
Got it. Makes sense. All right. So our next question is, when will you add dashboard view as a form view? Does that make sense?
When will form view be available in dashboard, I think?
That might be it. Joe, if you can clarify a little bit. But maybe Derek, go with that.
Yeah. There is an update coming to the desktop experience that was just recently sent into preview phase. There's an announcement in the community about that. I don't know if form view is on there, though. Do you know, Christian, by any chance?
I don't think so, but it could be. I mean, I can double check just kind of quickly internally.
Yeah. So we can try to get an answer for that before we wrap up for the day here. But for questions like that in general, the community is always the first place where we post announcements about new features and new roadmap plans. There's an announcements channel there. You can subscribe to it, and then you'll stay updated if that feature gets added in the future.
Speaking of roadmap stuff, we actually are in the process or the final stages of the process of nailing down our overall strategic roadmap for the second half of this year. And so once that wraps up in the next week or so, we'll be publishing the official PDF of our roadmap. So definitely stay tuned, and we can make sure the community is aware of that as well.
Awesome. Okay, yeah. And for any questions that we aren't able to get to today, we'll make sure that we include those in the recap post and that they're answered in the community. So, all right, one question here is, does AppScript connect to AppSheet?
So there is if you recall, we did an office hours a while back that showed like the new AppScript connectivity feature. So you can actually call a standalone function from an automation, for example, in an AppSheet app. Now, if you're also asking, can you connect from AppScript to AppSheet, you actually can do that. There is an API that AppSheet provides that you can essentially fetch data and pull data from the data or the application itself. Hopefully that answers your question. Also, we are in the process of rolling out. There's already been kind of like some announcements, but it takes a few days for the rollout to finish off. But basically, we have an update to the AppScript feature that allows you to also process or parse essentially the return response from an AppScript function. So that's also a very popular ask and very, a very common use case, obviously. So if you don't see it, definitely stay tuned for that part of the AppScript function.
Awesome. Okay, so kind of going back to this, could you show a detailed step on how to use white label deployment?
So, I mean, if you look at the product itself, I mean, other than just kind of stepping through, like I'll go over to my managed screen here. Give me 1 second. So I'll go ahead and present. Okay, I'm assuming you can see my screen. So under Manage, there is the Deploy tab, which is what we looked at before. We did the deployment check. So now there's the white label. So essentially create a white label version of the app. And so there are some requirements here to be aware of. So Publisher Pro, a minimum of 10 user licenses, etc. Then you would essentially click that, which then hopefully you can still see my screen. I'll give it a second to process. There we go. So hopefully you can still see my screen. So white label this app, it turned on. And if you're on Android, you have the specifics here, Firebase API key, optional, and then et cetera, et cetera. And then click on that, the final button there, and that walks you through essentially how to complete the process, right? So other than that, like I said, I haven't really gone through and done the final deployment, but that's basically how you would do Android. And then same thing for here, for iOS, there's obviously things that are iOS specific, bundle ID, short version string, things like that, that you would fill out all from this form here. And so, yeah, assuming you just walk through the process that it's delivered to you from this deployment UI, then yeah, it should lead you on the way. There's also some help articles. I think we just looked at a help article on how to whitelist your application as well, but we can definitely take a look at that as well. I don't know. Did you have anything else to share to that, Derek?
I would just recommend going through the documentation if you're ready to do that process. There are quite a few steps involved, but it's all listed out in the documentation. And if you need support beyond that, we do have an extensive partner network that can help you through some of those more advanced deployment processes. And if you need to identify partners that can help, the first step would always be to reach out to your sales team here at AppSheet.
And just for quick reference as well to that documentation, I just put a link to that in the chat, so you can search for specific questions that you might have there. Okay. Another question we have is, do you know, can you say when Google Tables, so not Sheets, will come out and can be a database for AppSheet?
Right. So we are actually working on that, and we are expecting to have a preview available later this year. But other than that, I can't really go into too much specifics until we officially announce how this is going to roll out. But just stay tuned. Literally within the next few weeks, we'll have a little more clarity on that. But basically, the preview will be rolling out at the latter in the fall timeframe. And then we have the GA expected for the first half of next year. And
Awesome.
so the idea is that it's integrated inside of AppSheet directly, as opposed to remaining separate. So
awesome. Okay.
So it will actually address one of a little bit of a shortcoming, I would say, in like if you want to change or design a data model, you always have, at least currently today with AppSheet, you always have to go to a third party, data modeling, or even just like a spreadsheet, to set up the schema or the columns, and then switch back to AppSheet. Whereas with this new integration that's coming, you can just do it directly from within AppSheet. And so it provides like a simplified data modeling experience without even having to start with some other product.
Great. Can the community produce a plugin for AppSheet in Google Sheets, Forms, Docs, and Slides?
Not sure if I understand the question so much. Produce a plugin for AppSheet.
Looks like maybe there's an updated, can the community produce plugin for AppSheet as in Google Sheets, Forms, Documents, and Slides?
So, I mean, yeah.
I'm not sure about the answer to that either. What are the, I mean, I think it depends what type of plugin you're trying to make and where you want to get it published. I know that there is there's an open source community to create add-ons to Google Workspace products like Sheets. A lot of those are published in the Google community. You could potentially create some add-on that uses some component of AppSheet, but unfortunately the answer is probably it depends on what you need to do. It would, I guess, the one thing I could add to that is the process for that wouldn't be an AppSheet specific process. If you're creating add-ons for Workspace, it would that touch AppSheet, it would be just in accordance with the the overall process for doing that for Workspace.
Sounds good. Okay, can AppSheet be collaborated or utilized with other Google apps like Docs or Forms?
Yes. So you can actually, so for example, you can have, I'm looking for the doc, AppSheet docs, but yeah, you can actually set up, like say, for example, an automation and have it actually build out like templatized Google Docs for you. And that's just kind of the beginning. There's a lot of different other permutations that you can do with AppSheet in general, but let's see. Cool. I can pull up one of those help articles. But
awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, you can also connect, like if you're using Google Forms, it can save content to a Google Sheet, and then you can connect AppSheet to that Google Sheet. So just using a shared data source is another option. And also, there was a question earlier about, does AppSheet have a connector to AppScript? And yes, you do. And one of the things you can do with that connector with AppScript is create Google Docs. So an action inside of AppSheet could trigger a formula in AppScript that would then create a Google Doc based on some content that you have inside of your app. So there's a lot of different ways you can combine those different products.
Yeah, I just added a link to essentially one of our help articles about how AppSheet can work with Google Docs in a templatized way. So definitely have a look at that.
Awesome. Thank you. Yep, that was just added. Okay, so I do see a couple questions around getting in touch with sales and licenses. So we'll address this question, but we get AppSheet Core along with Google Workspace for all users, but we cannot use the cloud databases to this. Even if we are updating the developers to AppSheet Enterprise, we were told we need to update all the Google Workspace users to AppSheet Enterprise to use that app. Is this true?
Yeah,
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, the end users of an app must have the same license type as the owner of the app. And we've heard feedback from people that about why should this be so? They're not making apps. Why should they have the same license type? And I mean, the short answer is that the people on this call don't set the licensing terms, so that's really out of our control. But I can try and do justice to the explanation, which is that when you have an AppSheet Enterprise license, it gives you the ability to use things like an advanced data source, like a SQL database. And even though the app user isn't building an app from that database, the interaction they have as an end user is interacting with data from that database. So whether you're interacting with the database as an app creator or interacting with the database as an end user, it's that interaction that is being included in the enterprise level license. So you would, in order to activate that for your users, you just need to understand how many people are going to be accessing the app, and then work with your sales team to get a licensing package put together for that.
And also just to kind of follow on, we definitely got a lot of feedback, and we're helping a number of our enterprise customers through essentially this particular question, where a lot of times they'll have their desires to have like a hybrid model where they'll have people on different SKUs, different licenses accessing a pool of apps. And so that's where it can get a little bit complex, but we're also taking the feedback in and continuing to discuss it. And maybe this will be a eventual simplification at some point, but for now, yeah, we definitely having discussions around this area. So.
Awesome. Thank you guys for that answer. All right. I think we just have a couple more. So if you have any more questions, please feel free to add those in and we'll get to them. But looks like we just have a few more. Is AppSheet interactive? So if a user approves a task, the app owner will get a notification, such as a push, email, text, etc.
Do you want to take that, Lauren?
Yes.
We're watching the presentation.
Yes. I'll give the simple short answer yes, and I'll let you elaborate.
Yeah, so I think I gave a demo of that, like someone like creates a record or does an update. So I did a variation of that. So approving a task would be like when a particular record of a table is updated. That's one of the automation triggers that you can fire and have it do any number of things: send an email, send an SMS, send a mobile update, like a push update, and then also call an app script function, or a webhook as well. So there's like a pretty good list of different things that you can take action on based off of a particular event, such as a record being updated or edited and such, or added, I guess. So short answer is yes.
Awesome. Perfect. Okay. One question here is, where can we find out what are the new features of AppSheet? Is there a place for a wish list? And I will take this one.
Yeah,
I can take.
But we have to also qualify that a little bit. But anyway.
Go ahead. Okay. Then you can go for it.
No, go for it. And then
just to say that new features for AppSheet, as we mentioned earlier on the call, there's a dedicated space in the community for release notes and the roadmap. So we'll add a link directly to that space shortly into the chat. And also there is a feature ideas section within the community that is where you can submit new ideas to improve AppSheet. So I think, Christian, if you want to elaborate on that a little bit more.
Yeah, I was just wanting to point out for feature ideas, that's an area that we've been looking at. And although it hasn't quite on the outside come to fruition, we have internal processes set up or being set up. We actually have a new person joining the team is going to be able to help us out. So what we've done in the meantime, kind of quietly, is we've actually taken about 1,500 feature ideas and we loaded them into our internal Buganizer, our bug database. And so now we're going to be setting up kind of like a series of bug batches to process these, so that way they can get properly routed. I think for a while there was a little bit of a kind of a, because we had different systems and a little bit of like incongruity, I guess, between the two different systems, how to get the right eyes into the different featured ideas. So now that we have some more folks on board, we'll be able to address those much more quickly. So hopefully, knock on wood, we'll be able to address those feature ideas as well in a rather or more timely manner, I would say.
Awesome. Okay, I believe we got to all of the questions that have been added in. If there are any others that come through, as we said, we'll make sure to include those in the roundup of this and to respond to them in the community. And then, yeah, keep an eye out in the community as well for this recording and a link to step-by-step kind of instructions that Christian went through today. And with that, I just want to...
One request myself. Just before we wrap up, feel free to let us know what you like of this App Jam concept, and if there's any particular topics you would like to see covered in like closer detail with like a live presentation. Yeah, feel free to let us know. I'm sure we could continue to line these up down the road as well.
Perfect. Yeah, and we actually have time for just 2 more questions, so we'll take those. Can you show the sample app that you produced today? How to use the dereferences and template start expressions to create reports in AppSheet.
So let's see. You wanted to show the sample app that I produced today. So that in itself, that is, I think, one aspect we were just discussing before the meeting. I will publish it so that anyone can actually download it and try it out. Well, just stay tuned. I also have the steps to how to build it. And so that way you can actually just build it from scratch if you like. And then how to use the references or dereferences and templates, start expressions to create reports and apps. So there's a couple of different things going on there. But with regards to references, I mean, that's basically how you can relate the different tables together, and you set up that specific data type to point to another table. I don't know if there's anything else to add. There are templates, also kind of slightly different or much broader subject. We have our whole templating system, and so these are just example apps that you can try out and see how they work for you. And then, of course, addressing reports. It depends on what you're going to create a report with. I mean, you can have AppSheet typically have like your first line of data entry and stuff like that, but a lot of times people will create reporting systems that utilize the underlying data. So for example, I know of one customer in particular, I just had a meeting with them today. They have a mechanism where they put all of their data into BigQuery, and then they use Data Studio to create reports on top of that. And then they just utilize a simple RESTful connection to the AppSheet API directly to fetch all that data and put it into BigQuery. And so they're actually, fairly sophisticated setup, but that's one example of how people can create reports. And so you're pretty agnostic with regards to reporting, depending on like what types of reporting software that you tend to use, and then finding like a solution for you guys.
Awesome. Yep. And we will have that sample app to share with you later.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any known life cycle or time to retire AppSheet as a product? Can we rely on AppSheet for creating products, say, for the next 5 years?
I'll try not to comment on previous experience, but yeah. So in general, there is the notion of core, and core is a designation that establishes like a longer lifespan. But we're all operating on the assumption that we're in it to stay. There's been a considerable investment for making sure that this type of development tool succeeds and flourishes, and to complement what we already provide with Google Cloud and Workspace as a whole. So AppSheet is kind of in the intersection between the two worlds. So personally, I don't really see any reason why we would suddenly kind of step back from it. There was a product known as AppMaker, which was kind of similar. It was a little bit more code-centric, and it was utilizing AppScript kind of natively. Because there was a bit of a change up in the executive leadership, there was kind of a different take on how to approach these low code or no code tools. So subsequently, that product was deprecated, unfortunately. But we've moved on. We've actually acquired AppSheet in January of 2020 to basically go right into this area. And this time it's focusing more on the no code, but with different connections to the low-code environment, such as what you see with the AppScript connector. And there's a lot of other connectors that are about to come online that definitely tap into the non-pure no-code audience, but into kind of like a mixture of personas out there that may have coding experience, or they are complementary experience to like an overall application that could have like a simple no-code front end to it. So these are all good stuff, and we have a lot of interest from our customers, definitely on the enterprise as well, that want to see this succeed as well. So I don't see this disappearing anytime soon. So. You can also see analyst reports talking about this overall market, and they project it to be continuously growing. So yeah, I think Google will be here for the long haul.
Awesome. All right, everyone. Well, any final closing thoughts from you, Christian or Derek, before we close out today?
Thank you for that great session, Christian.
Yeah. Oh, no, very happy to do it. Obviously, I just kind of like walk through the basics there. Obviously, looking forward to maybe doing some more interesting or fun or more advanced stuff. So yeah, but let us know what you think.
Yep. Awesome. And yeah, the last link there in the chat is to that feedback form. So if you have any comments, future session ideas, topics you'd like to see us focus on, please let us know. All right. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Christian. Thank you, Derek. And we hope to see you at office hours on August 4th. All right.
Thank you, Lauren, as well. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.